Hi, Owen Everard here. So just talking about the newsletter. Thanks a million for giving it a read or listening to this YouTube video about it. So basically, I'm just going to chat through some of the articles so that if you're cycling, if you're running, you might have this playing in the background. You can kind of understand what the articles are about if you don't have time to read them, or you just rather this as a way of getting through it. So the first one is I'll be putting a quote with all these newsletters. If you're on my list, you'll know that I always start a quote with the newsletters I have. So the one I have is, if you really want to do something, you'll find a way. And if you don't, you'll find an excuse. And it's like, we are all busy, but we do have time, it's like some things we can just, and they can be valid excuses, but there's always a way around it. Maybe if we structure our day a little bit better, maybe if we think about the way we're doing key things, can we carve out, like, say, half an hour to do something, or 45 minutes, or can we structure something? Maybe it's saying no to something else. So that was just a nice little quote to think about. So the next thing then was an infographic, and the title is "Don't Think About Technique." So this comes from a study from Shukera and Parrington in the Journal of Sports Science in 2018. And what they did was they looked at three groups. They got one group to think about their movement, to think of like having good form when you run, like, being on your toes, or trying to keep upright, and just focus on trying to run like with really good technique. The second group, they said, try to run with focusing on your breathing. So make sure you're breathing smooth as you run. And the last group just said, just run and watch the TV. Okay, and what they found then was that the worst running economy, so that's like how much energy you burn when running, was reported in both the internal focus, which is the breathing, and the movement, compared to the external focus on the video. And this replicates previous findings. So what they found is people run less efficiently when you constantly think about what to do. So if you're constantly thinking about your breathing, or constantly thinking about your running technique, you're going to actually run worse. The key thing, if you want to improve your running technique, is to get the building blocks correct. So have a good level of mobility, work on your activation and your stabilization exercises, get the glutes and the core firing. And then you can also do some drills. If you did some strides, slight hill strides after your run, or some like A skips or high knees, if you were that way inclined, in a warm up. They're the things that improve running efficiency and your stride, not trying to think about it. And in fact, as a physio, I see a lot of people get into trouble when they try to improve their technique by running on their toes or keeping up tall. These things can make you do things that your body isn't really prepared for. So just focusing down from where you're running. So if you're running, just look down the road. That'll keep your head up tall anyway. So looking down to where you're trying to run, and just running then, and trusting that your body will be able to do it naturally, seems to be the best way. Bob Atara, he's a golf coach, and he always says, with Porrick Harrington, that rather than working on their swing a lot, he just says, just work on the mechanics of the swing, what you think might work on it. But then when you're swinging the ball, just focus on the hole, or focus where the flag is, and just hit it there. Because beginners need to focus on each particular point. Experts have that ingrained. And a lot of reasons why people say miss penalties in a penalty shootout is because it's a nervous time. They revert back into thinking much more about the mechanics of what to do. Okay, I'll plant my foot here, I'll try strike through the ball. And they actually are striking it more like a beginner. Dennis Taylor as well, in the final against Steve Davis in snooker, he talks about that. It's like, I just got down and I tried work on my cue action, and they were missing the black ball for loads. Now he won it in the end, but that's things that beginners do. So don't overly focus on what you're trying to do. Give yourself the building blocks, and then literally just look down the road where you're trying to run to, and you'll run a lot more efficient than if you're trying to think about your breathing or think about your technique. Okay, training section then is the hill training, and we'll have different articles as we go. So here's 4 little tips for hill training. Now this is funny, I put this as watch your form as the first one, because I'm actually just after saying to not really overly concentrate on your technique. But with this one, what I would say watch your form is give yourself slight cues going into a hill. So you want to lean very slightly into the hill, okay? And I constantly try like just power your arms. Okay, so the first one is as you're running a hill, especially as it gets steeper, lean a little bit into the hill. Okay, you'll naturally shorten your stride. It's like nearly going down the gears. And then don't focus on trying to get your legs to move quickly. Just focus on pumping your arms. Okay, so when you come up to a hill, you're going to lean a little bit into the hill and you're just going to focus on pumping your arms. That's the main things that you want to do. You want to lean a little bit in, you shorten your stride slightly, and you just pump your arms going up the hill. Okay, so the third was just the stride. So you just shorten the stride as we go off. And then the last one is run off the top. So if you're doing even a hill session or a hill workout, don't have it that you just stop at the highest point. If the hill kind of flattens out, always practice this running off the top of the hill, because you're generating a lot more power going up a hill. So if you just continue for say like 5 meters after the hill peaks or apexes and it starts to go flat again, it teaches you how to use that power more when you're running on more flat a flat position. So it's a nice way to transition back out of it. And I always really recommend hills. You don't have to go super steep a gradient, like 5 degrees, 10 degrees is perfect to do strides afterwards. So if you had a run, maybe once a week, if you could do 3 or 4 10 to 15 second strides up a very slight incline. It doesn't have to be a very hard incline, about that type of incline. What that allows you to do is just increase your power, increase the amount your muscles are working, but you're not, because you're going uphill, you're going to be slightly slower than if you were going downhill or flat. So it kind of keeps your muscles safe. Okay, so that's just hill training. As I said, we'll be doing different ones as we go on. Like fartlek training, tempo training. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like us to cover, just let me know. We might do the 5 training zones in the next newsletter, so you kind of know about that. But if you have any questions, you can just put them in the comments here and I can get back to you, and maybe that'll be what we'll put in the next newsletter. Okay, so the next section is an avoid an injury section. So it's always a bit of training, avoid injury, and then we have an interview. Okay, so if you think about it, you never hear about a long distance runner, 5K or above, get a muscle tear. These are not injuries that we seem to get. However, we all suffer tendon, ligament, or joint tissue injuries at some point in our lives. So why is that? The reason is that we basically overload these passive structures when we run, and we do not overload or really use the muscular system enough. Now that's important because people get plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, knee pain, hip pain, back pain. You don't really hear of people like tearing a muscle because the muscular system isn't really being used. A lot of times it's like, especially when we're sitting for like say 8 to 10 hours, it's like it's actually dormant. The glutes aren't working, the core is not working. So we go out and we run, which is great for cardiovascular health, but isn't brilliant for I can't use my words, isn't brilliant for muscular activation the way like sprinting or field sports, say like our GAA would be, or soccer. So so that's the reason we get injured, that we overload those areas. So there's a couple of ways that we can try to reduce the chance of injury. The first is have good variety in your training. So we talked about strides. Doing strides at the end of a run, it changes the range of motion you're using in your hips and at your knees and at your ankles. So by increasing the range of motion, it's like there's a thing called synovial fluid in the joints. It's basically like the oil. That gets that oil moving around. Also doing strides, it allows you to kind of activate the muscles more. You don't have to include these afterwards. A lot of times people are like, oh, I don't have time for strides. Just cut 5 minutes out of your run. Increase your pace. Never try force these. Just try increase your pace a little for 10 to 20 seconds and then jog easier than you were going for the next 40 seconds and do that 4 times. Okay, change the surface. Can you run a lot more on grass? Again, grass, because the impact when you hit, the grass deforms slightly. You can't see it, but compared to concrete, it's not giving as much force back up through the joints or the passive structures. It's a lot better. But changing the surface, again, it doesn't let your feet get reliant on the same surface the whole time at the same range of motion. Having like intervals or tempo. So, if you do the, the club sessions are really good, or the club's workouts, because it makes you do slightly different work. So I'd really encourage you to go there, and it's great. It sets a time in the week to do that. So it's a good idea. If anyone needs any other ones on our Sports Pilates, we have sample training programs. So it's just an idea of that you should have a good variety in your week. Okay, the second thing is include Pilates or a gym routine at least once a week. Okay, so the second injury prevention tip is to strengthen or activate the muscular system. Okay, a good program should be targeting the key muscles that become lazy. So do imbalance work, so standing on one leg, improves your neuromuscular control. It strengthens the stabilizer muscles in the foot or the calf. Once they've activated in this manner, it's easier to stay awake and take some pressure off your run. So it's like, this is an analogy I use, that if I'm beside you in a bar and someone is kind of starting a fight, well, I'm going to help break it up and I'm going to be there to help you. If I'm asleep in my bed and someone's starting a fight, I'm not there to help you and you're on your own. And that's a little bit, as we said, if you, especially when we do the longer distances, if your muscular system hasn't been woken up through some formalized work, it's just asleep. It's like it's me in the bed. It's like it's not there to help the other structures. So that means that the Achilles tendon, the knees, the hips, they're getting overloaded, and the muscular system isn't doing their work. So I have people come and it's like, well, I'm doing a glute stretch, so I thought that would help. It's like, sorry, you stretching for 30 seconds when you're sitting for 8 to 10 hours a day is not going to cut the mustard here, So it's about having at least once a week a kind of sports Pilates or a gym routine that you do that essentially just like wakes up or stimulates the muscles. Now it'll give you a better like tone in the muscles, so you look aesthetically better, but it's much more important that it gets that consistency in your training that allows you to wake these muscles up, so that when you're running, now they're woken up, they're going to naturally take the pressure off. Your body never wants to be injured. It wants to be as healthy as possible. But just with modern day-to-day life, it can go against us. So we just need to give it that help. So having like exercises focused on your glutes and your core allows for easier activation of the muscles when running. Like we have our Sports Pilates, and we'll be offering you a free trial. You can get a free trial of that. It's sport free trial. The link is on the bottom of the newsletter on the email if you want to just check that out. But like, at least then, even if you weren't going to sign up for the course, you could see if the type of exercises suit you, or what are the type of exercises you should be doing. You don't have to do that. We have gym routines, or you might have a gym routine you do yourself. We've like, obviously I'm a runner. I've dealt with a lot of runners and triathletes at all levels. So we have it very specific to what runners need. But if you have a routine that you like to do yourself, I would just recommend doing that. But it's important that you're doing something once a week to try really activate those muscles so they start taking the pressure off, especially if you're doing the longer distances, the half marathons, the marathons, even 10Ks, 5Ks. It's just to get that variation in your training. Okay, the last thing is make sure you're not increasing the amount of training or the type of training you're doing too quickly. So if you're going from, say, 5K training and now you're going to train for a marathon, make sure that if you have that in your head that like, well, say if you're going to do a spring marathon, but you're just doing 5Ks now or cross country, that's fine. But make sure that you once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you're doing a kind of longer run. You're doing like a 12-mile run or a 13-mile run, and you just keep that in there so that when you start then the marathon training, and you can start at 12 or 13 miles and gradually increase that. If you've not done nothing but like, say, a 10-mile run or an 8-mile run, and then you're going into marathon training, and week 1 is like 12 miles and week 2 is 13, 14 and 15, it's a very quick build up when you don't have any of that training done. It's the same if you're doing marathon training. It's still important to keep a little bit of speed and stride work into your program, so that if you transition back, which you should be, back to say like 5K running, like you want to do a few park runs, it's not so far into what you're doing. So there's a thing called the acute to chronic workload ratio, which means that it's not the amount of load you do that is the real indicator of injury. It's acute spikes above, like, say, 10% of what you were of your training load. So don't increase your training load or the training type more than 10%, and try keep all the different types of training in there in little bits. It's not hard to add a couple of strides, or 30 second kind of 90-second sprints, essentially, or 90% sprints, not going super hard, but just to keep the legs turning at like 5K pace with a decent recovery. It's not that hard if you are doing more 5Ks, once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, still keeping in a longer run. It'll allow you to transition back to what you're doing much more. Whereas if you just go from one and then totally jump to another one, it can make a big difference. It can kind of stop you getting the benefits you should. Okay, so there were the three things. The next one then is, like, we have an athlete in focus. I was talking to Aileen Reid. Her used to be called Aileen Morrison. She kind of went by the two names during her career. Really interesting chat with Aileen. She would have went to the 2012 and 2016 Olympics. At the 2012 Olympics, she fell. She had a crash on the bike. She came home 46th, really disappointed. She then continued to train hard. She came back to the same course next year, and at the World Triathlon Series final in London on the same course, she came second. So that was a serious redemption for her, and she's one of our most decorated triathletes. So I asked her how she got into triathlon. She was doing triathlon at school. She was a swimmer. They just borrowed some bikes, and that's how she got going. So, it's so funny how we can just, little things can kind of shape you. I asked her then, she came second in the final leg of the World Triathlon Series in London. Looking back, what do you put down your great achievement to? And again, as you said, she was just talking about being very disappointed after London, after building up for that event, and then it all come literally crashing down. So she's able to come back to the same course a year later and come second against a similar competition was just brilliant. Regards the reasons for my achievement, I switched group in 2013, but I think all the work I'd done with my first coach, Chris Jones, plus the new environment really helped. Mainly though, it was just consistent training. There wasn't one particular training session. It was just staying fit and healthy, getting consistent training in that made a difference. The key line that it takes 10 years to become an overnight sensation comes to mind. And you see that with so many elite athletes. It isn't just this one, and I've trained with a lot of really good athletes, and it's not that they're unbelievable at one particular workout or session. It's just that cumulatively over time, when you're always a little bit fatigued, but like cumulatively over time, they've just had this like bank of training that they're getting gradually fitter and fitter, and then they start to peak. And that was really what Aileen was alluding to. Like, so I asked her, she's been in Australia, she's working with the junior Australian team. Like, so I just was asking her, how does she think it's changed triathlons? And she was like, from a competitive side, I think the main thing that's changed is how well-rounded the top athletes must be now. When I was competing, being excellent in one discipline and very good at the others could win the World Series. Like Gwen, for example, was an exceptional runner, but now athletes like Flora, they're great across all three disciplines. That being said, it kind of changes with the best athletes. Someone starts implementing new tactics and people have to adapt. And that's the way always, sometimes you might see someone who's just unbelievable on the bike or running, and then someone else comes back who is an all-rounder, and so people start thinking, okay, well, it's best to be an all-rounder, but it's kind of just whatever is going. What advice would you have for people in your 30s, 40s or 50s and above to get to the most? Now, she's only just turned 40 and she has two little people, so it's pretty hard to get out the door, but it really is about time management. I think it's about setting some time aside, scheduled sessions with your club are great because it sets it in the diary. And I think that's so important to have given people in your life set times. It's like, look, I go here, I do my Pilates. Say we always set a Monday at 7. So at least everybody knows it. Like Tuesday, I go for my run here. Wednesday could be the club session. Thursday could be off, or Friday because it's busy, but just outlining that for everybody. And then it's at least kind of written in stone, having that structure. Otherwise, like, life just gets in the way if you don't plan that stuff. Okay, if there's one race you could relive, what would it be and why? Well, she was. I thought she'd have more on these, but she didn't really. She was like, half the races were just so painful that she'd never want to go back. Like, thinking of those races, I'm glad I'm retired. I would love to relive the finishing shoot of my medal performances in the World Series, but not the races. They were too painful. So I thought that was funny. Is there any quote you like, or if you could have, because I love quotes, or if you could have something written on a billboard to give advice to triathletes or athletes, what would it be? So there's nothing she lives by. She said, I'm working with the Australian junior athletes now, and I always tell them that the key to success is staying healthy and getting consistent training in. We advise them on their diet, to make sure they're eating enough. Look after your body is critical. It's your vehicle, so you need to mind it as you go forward. So, and again, I always think that's a good idea, to think of your body as a car. If it's a car you couldn't change, like you'd service it regularly, you'd make sure you looked after it. Now, we're lucky, like, our bodies can restore much more than the car, but still, it's a good way to think about it. You only get one body. So, if you only got one car, you treat it a lot better than a lot of us treat our bodies. Then I was just asking her some of her favorite sessions. So one of her favorite swim sessions was the birthday set, which was 40 by 50 meters. So you go 16 lengths, and every fourth one would be fast. Then you would take, say, 45 seconds off. Then you do 12 with every third one fast. Then you take 50 seconds off, and you do 8 of them with every second one fast. Then you take 55 off, and then you do 4, and they're all fast without a break. So sounds like a tough session. Favorite bike and run sessions? She was never a big fan of the bike, but she just used to go out for the Wednesday and Saturday cycle sessions with the Maryland Wheelers, and having a tea and a bun afterwards was the highlight. And then she used to do 24 by 200s on the track with a float, which means like a kind of semi-steady jog recovery, and that was pretty fast. It's a lot of 200s, so I'd probably break that up if it was me. My one would be do 5 by 200, semi-fast with and then double the distance. So say if you're doing a 240, so like about 90% effort. So if you did that in, like, say 40 seconds, then you would have 80 seconds to jog the 200 to the start again, and then you would repeat that 5 times. So you do 2K and take, say, 5 minutes off, and you could do like 2 to 3 sets of that. That's a good session. It's quite intense though. Okay, so that's the article. As I said, I just have a thing here that we have a free trial of the Sports Pilates available. So, we have nearly over 100 5-star reviews for the Pilates. We have it live, which is great, on Monday nights in Kilkenny. Or we have our online Pilates as well, and you can visit that. You can either email me at oweneverard, EOINEVERARD @gmail.com, and we can set you up for a free trial, or you can go and go to everardpilates.com / sport free trial, and I can put that in the bottom of the newsletter as well, and you can just sign up for the online class. I recommend to do it. You'd see the type of exercises you should be doing. You can see if it suits you. If it does, you can join the course. If it doesn't, there's no big deal. Okay, thanks very much. Hope you enjoy that.